right. So you've sent over some really interesting articles about Chernobyl, and it seems like you're particularly drawn to this idea of it becoming, well, a tourist destination.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical vacation spot.
Not exactly beaches and pina coladas.
Right, exactly. And I think it's really interesting how it kind of reflects this broader trend of what's called dark tourism.
Dark tourism.
Yeah, so basically instead of, seeking out those relaxing getaways, dark tourists are drawn to places that are marked by tragedy or disaster.
Which Chernobyl, of course, tragically fits right into that.
Absolutely.
For those who maybe don't remember or haven't heard all the details, back in 1986, the world watched in horror as reactor number 4 exploded. And it released this massive amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere. And it was really just this stark reminder of the just devastating power of nuclear energy and what can happen when things go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fascinating how a place that's so heavily associated with tragedy has, kind of transformed into something that people, actually want to visit. And it begs the question, why? Like, what is it about this place that draws people in? And I think it's, it goes beyond just morbid curiosity.
Yeah, and your articles really highlighted that. And one thing you talk about that I found really interesting was the idea of standing in Pripyat, which is that, abandoned city near the reactor.
Yeah,
and just being surrounded by these crumbling buildings, nature kind of taking over.
It's eerie.
It is. It's eerie. You even mentioned a Ferris wheel just frozen in time.
Frozen in time, yeah. It's like stepping into a post-apocalyptic movie, but it's real. And it's that tangibility, that realness that you just can't get from a textbook.
And you described it as, you used the words eerily beautiful, which I thought was really interesting.
It is.
Almost like this time capsule. But it's not just stillness, right? There's this unexpected resurgence of life. You noted that wildlife is actually thriving within the Chernobyl exclusion zone.
Okay, it's actually pretty amazing. With humans gone, nature has really bounced back. You see wolves, deer, even wild horses. They've created this whole ecosystem in this area that's off limits to most people. It's really a testament to, I guess, the resilience of nature, even after such a disaster.
Yeah, it's this really striking contrast, isn't it?
It is.
This eerie abandoned landscape and then this thriving ecosystem existing right alongside it. And speaking of the exclusion zone, what exactly does that mean? Because I know obviously it's there for safety reasons due to the radiation, but how do they even determine those boundaries?
Well, that's a great question. Essentially, the exclusion zone is a designated area around the Chernobyl power plant, and it's considered unsafe for people to live there permanently because of, the lingering radiation. It actually covers a huge area, roughly 1,000 square miles. And to figure out the boundaries, they have to constantly monitor and map those radiation levels, which is a massive undertaking.
So they're constantly monitoring. So is it actually safe to visit Chernobyl? I feel like that's the big question a lot of people probably have.
Yeah, for sure. I know it was definitely my first question, and it might be surprising to hear, but it actually is considered safe to visit Chernobyl.
Okay.
But there's a big caveat. You can only go as part of a guided tour, and these tours are really strictly controlled.
So it's not like you're just wandering around on your own.
No. They stick to specific routes where the radiation is constantly monitored, and it's kept within safe limits for the short term.
So you're not going to get radiation poisoning from being there for a few hours.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes me feel better, honestly. I have to admit I was a little, apprehensive about this whole tourism angle.
Yeah, I get it, but it's those precautions, that controlled environment that I think actually makes it even more powerful, Yeah. Well, you're seeing the aftermath of a nuclear disaster, firsthand, with your own eyes, but you're doing it in a way that lets you really grasp the magnitude of what happened without putting yourself in danger. Like seeing reactor no. 4 up close, encased in that massive concrete sarcophagus.
Yeah.
It's really sobering, a real reminder of the forces we're dealing with.
You mentioned the sarcophagus. One of the articles touched on its purpose, but I have to admit, I don't fully get the science behind it.
It's pretty amazing, actually, a marvel of engineering, really. Basically, the sarcophagus, which is also sometimes called the new safe confinement structure because, it's this giant steel arch that actually covers the original concrete structure they built right after the explosion, because that one obviously was falling apart.
Oh, right.
And this new one, it's designed to basically trap those radioactive remnants from the reactor and stop them from leaking out into the environment. It's like a high-tech shield, basically.
Wow. It really highlights how Chernobyl isn't just a tourist destination. It's like this living, breathing testament to this devastating power of nuclear energy and the importance of safety protocols.
Absolutely. And the long-lasting impact of human error. I mean, one of the articles you shared called Chernobyl, a case study, and I think that is so spot on.
How so?
It really forced the entire world to confront the realities of nuclear power, like nothing else had. And it really led to this international collaboration on safety standards. It pushed advancements in how we design reactors.
Yeah.
And it really just gave us a much deeper understanding of the long-term consequences, the environmental impact, the health effects of radiation exposure.
And those are lessons that go way beyond the scientific community, don't they?
Exactly, exactly. Even if you just visit Chernobyl as a tourist on a controlled tour and you see the aftermath firsthand, it gives you this visceral understanding of the consequences of, our actions, not just individually, but as a global society.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that really struck me in one of the articles was the mention of the liquidators. Could you maybe explain their role?
The liquidators, those were the true heroes in the aftermath of Chernobyl. They were the ones who ran towards the danger while everyone else was fleeing. The firefighters, the engineers, even just everyday citizens really putting their lives on the line to try to contain that disaster and limit how bad it could have been.
Wow. What kind of things did they do?
Everything. Extinguishing the fires, getting people out of the area safely, decontaminating as much as they could. It was incredibly dangerous work. And sadly, a lot of them suffered really serious health problems later on because of the radiation. But their courage was incredible.
Their story is a really powerful reminder of the human cost of these kinds of disasters. It seems like there are so many layers to this whole Chernobyl experience. It's the history, it's the science, the human stories, even these ethical questions it raises.
It really is multifaceted. It's one of those things that stays with you long after you leave.
For a place with such a heavy, tragic past, it's interesting how it's become a draw for tourists.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is drawing people to a place like Chernobyl?
I think it's a different kind of tourism, that's for sure. It's not relaxing, it's not always easy, but it's about engaging with history and science, even the human condition, but in a way that is just so raw and powerful. There's this element of maybe confronting mortality, understanding how fragile our existence can be, and I think there's also a desire to learn from past mistakes, to try and prevent them from happening again.
It's like we're looking in a mirror, in a way. We see this awful tragedy, this mourning, but we're still drawn to it. We want to understand, connect with history, but up close.
Yeah, it brings up all kinds of feelings, that's for sure. It makes you wonder, can a place like this, so tied to tragedy, ever really just be a tourist spot? It changes how we see tourism,
Makes you think. It's understandable, right? To just want to stay away, not open up that dark part of history again.
Yeah.
But there's this pull, too, like you said, to learn from it. Pay respects, even. It makes you think about your own life, how fragile things are, what we do, what it can lead to.
We need that sometimes, maybe. To face those hard truths, find meaning in the tough stuff. It's a very personal thing, how you approach a place like Chernobyl.
You've given me, and I'm sure anyone listening, a lot to think about. I had a certain idea of Chernobyl going into this, and it's definitely shifted.
It sticks with you. That's what this kind of tourism does, I think. Forces us to face the hard parts, see different sides of things.
It does. And for anyone listening, if this sparks your curiosity, if you feel that pull to learn more, dive into the history, the science of it all, the stories of the people who lived through it.
Oh, absolutely.
There's so much out there, documentaries, firsthand accounts.
Knowledge is power, after all. And understanding things like Chernobyl, it helps us make sense of this complicated world, make better choices for the future.
Couldn't agree more. Well, I think that brings our Chernobyl deep dive to an end. Fascinating, if a bit heavy, to explore.
It really was.
To everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time.